Hello all, welcome to my YouTube channel. This is Shravya and right now I'm going to explain you about the phase 2, which is early fasting of glucose homeostasis. If you have not visited the first video I've made regarding the glucose homeostasis explaining the well-fed state, please do check it out. You can understand it better. So without any further delay, let's check it out. Early fasting, 4 to 16 hours after food. Now this is the hyperglycemic hormone dominant state because the hypoglycemic hormone, which is insulin, has caused enough decrease of hyperglycemia during the well-fed state in order to cause the glucose homeostasis. But now it has been 4 to 16 hours since the person has had his food. So now the level of insulin starts slowly getting decreased and the hyperglycemic hormone level starts getting increased. And now this hypoglycemic hormone will act through the glycogenolysis in order to produce glucose to the body. If you have some money with you, you will just save some amount of money if you're a smart person and spend the rest of money for your usages. Whenever is that you're deprived of money, you'll use the savings you have. That is how the glucose levels work in our body. When you are having enough amount of glucose or more than enough amount of glucose in the well-fed state, that extra amount of glucose is converted into glycogen and also into the lipids, and the glucose we need is converted into ATP through glycolysis and Krebs cycle. But now you're slowly getting deprived of glucose, so now you're in need of it. Hence the stored form of glycogenolysis, which are your savings, are being spent now. So let's see how we spend our savings. This is the beautiful picture which explains us how the hyperglycemic hormones glucagon and epinephrine increase the glycogenolysis within the body during the early fasting, which is 4 to 16 hours after food. The upper part of the picture shows the receptors of glucagon as well as epinephrine embedded within the plasma membrane. Now the interaction of glucagon and epinephrine with their respective receptors causes the increased activity of adenylyl cyclase. This converts ATP into cyclic AMP, and that cyclic AMP is indicated by the red dots over there. This cyclic AMP is going to cause the activation of cyclic AMP dependent protein kinase. And this picture also explains how cyclic AMP is causing the activation of cyclic AMP dependent protein kinase. Let me explain it to you. The cyclic AMP dependent protein kinase have 4 subunits, of which 2 are identical and the other 2 are also identical to each other. That is, the first 2 subunits are regulatory subunits and the other 2 subunits are catalytic subunits. The catalytic subunits are identical to each other and also the regulatory subunits are identical to each other. The cyclic AMP will bind to the regulatory subunits as it is indicated in the picture, which is resulting in the release of catalytic subunits, and it's just making the catalytic subunit free so that it can act over the glycogen phosphorylase kinase. So as it is indicated in the picture, the interaction of cyclic AMP with the regulatory units release the the catalytic units of the cyclic AMP dependent protein kinase, and this catalytic unit of cyclic AMP dependent protein kinase is causing the phosphorylation and activation of glycogen phosphorylase kinase, because kinase always causes phosphorylation. And once the glycogen phosphorylase kinase is activated upon phosphorylation caused by cyclic AMP dependent protein kinase, this glycogen phosphorylase kinase is going to convert the inactive form of glycogen phosphorylase into its active form upon phosphorylation. Now this is where the fourth statement amongst the 4 statements I've said earlier in my first phase video is explained. As the glycogen phosphorylase belongs to the pathway which is glycogenolysis activated by hyperglycemic hormones, it is always activated upon phosphorylation and inactivated upon dephosphorylation. Now let's look at this entire pathway from two eyes. The first eye or the first perspective is from the perspective of early fasting state. What happens? The hyperglycemic hormones activate the adenylyl cyclase, causing the cyclic AMP formation, and cyclic AMP dependent kinase is activated. Cyclic AMP dependent protein kinase will phosphorylate and activate glycogen phosphorylase kinase, and glycogen phosphorylase kinase will phosphorylate and activate glycogen phosphorylase, so that this glycogen phosphorylase can cause the glycogenolysis, and this can release the glucose into the blood in order to meet the ends. But let's just look at the very same pathway from the perspective of well-fed state, or from the eye of insulin. What is the insulin causing right here? It is at one side inhibiting the glycogen phosphorylase kinase and also the glycogen phosphorylase by dephosphorylating them. As the glycogen phosphorylase belongs to the pathway activated by hyperglycemic hormones, it is always inactivated upon dephosphorylation. This is why insulin will potentiate the effects of dephosphorylation causing enzymes, which are protein phosphatases, also called as protein hydrolases, so that they'll dephosphorylate glycogen phosphorylase kinase and glycogen phosphorylase as well. And also at the other side, the insulin also activates phosphodiesterase, and this phosphodiesterase will convert cyclic AMP into 5' AMP, so that the ultimate activation of cyclic AMP will get blocked. So this is the way insulin works. But now as we are talking about early fasting state, hyperglycemic hormones will hold the upper hand, so always glycogen degradation is remaining promoted and encouraged. We all know that calcium is important for muscle contraction to happen, because calcium binds to the troponin, and troponin now unmasks the binding units or the binding sites of myosin over the actin. But let's just discuss the role of calcium in the muscle glycogenolysis as well. So the calcium is released from the sarcoplasmic reticulum in need of the troponin binding. So the calcium which is released in that way performs another function of it, which is the binding of calcium with calmodulin. Calmodulin is the component of the enzyme glycogen phosphorylase, which causes glycogenolysis. The calcium calmodulin complex will result in the activation of glycogen phosphorylase. So the calcium which is released from the sarcoplasmic reticulum is binding with the calmodulin, which is resulting in calcium calmodulin complex formation, which is converting the inactive form of glycogen phosphorylase into active form of glycogen phosphorylase, which is resulting in the glycogenolysis, and ultimately we get the glucose 6-phosphate. But as the muscle lacks glycogen 6-phosphatase, it cannot contribute the glucose to the circulation, but glucose 6-phosphate is directly channeled towards the glycolysis, and the ATP is derived and the muscle contraction is permitted. So indirectly the calcium is also helping for the muscle contraction by other means. Here's where I'd like to talk about a fun fact. The people who always like to grow their muscles will totally avoid carbs in their diet, but they never know that the muscles they are very interested in growing are interested in nothing other than glucose, in such a way that they are very selfish to contribute glucose towards the circulation. But liver is a very selfless organ, because it is having glucose 6-phosphatase which can help it contribute the glucose to the circulation. Kudos to liver. Thank you. This is how I wind up the phase 2, and for the complete understanding of glucose homeostasis, please listen all the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4 videos of glucose homeostasis I've made.